I suppose I've told a story of privilege coming from a position where I started in life with confidence that actually probably got to a level that was unhealthy in my 20s, that I thought I was invincible. With age came a degree of reflection, a sort of moderation, and that we all experience, where you start to become a little bit more uncertain. But it all comes to a head one evening in August last year, where I went from, I'd sat working in the afternoon, thinking that it was all getting ahead of the game and being nice and organized so that I would start the week on a positive note, and spent that night wondering about where my bank statements were and whether my wife would be able to find them in an organized way. And that reset progressed. The next evening, I lay awake, completely with absolutely no basis in fact. Spent the evening, the second night in hospital, worrying about whether I would ever be able to go back to work as a consequence of this, because not being able to cope in a high stress environment is basically completely incompatible with my role. And then, after a week, this is my first experience with healthcare. I've had the occasional, was born, had the occasional broken bone as a child, and then in my 40s ended up in hospital and not far off in life support. And week 2, when it didn't start, my legs didn't start to heal, I started wondering, will I ever actually be able to walk again? And happily, that happened fairly quickly. I didn't need to dwell on that. But each step in that journey, confidence that I'd built over years by professional knowledge and experience, that meant that I was basically confident in any environment, got reduced to nil. And I just had to remember that I could do things and that I shouldn't be. Things had changed, but actually by recognizing what had changed and what I could do to positively impact the difficulties that were going to be in my way has helped me rebuild that. Obviously, talking about myself for a period of time has me completely terrified. That's a side issue rather than.
Why is that?
I don't know. I've spent my entire life dealing with other people's complicated problems, and when it comes to talking about my own challenges and overcoming them, it starts to get really, really difficult. That reflection's hard, but actually forcing myself to think about, well, sharing what I can remember about the journey I have been on, I think is incredibly valuable. Like, people will be able to get things out of this. Anyway, remembering, I guess, understanding what I've experienced, what it's going to mean, what I'm going to need to change, and then following through on it and creating structures around it have helped build confidence that everything's going to be okay, and equally has helped with the process of it being okay. And then the other step in that confidence journey was sitting with you in front of hundreds of my colleagues and potentially an audience of all of our 7,000 or so staff that were at the time. Sharing some fairly stark truths about myself was pretty powerful. I think you'll never find out how many people are on blood thinners until you tell them you are, and then everyone will come and tell you that they are. So it's also been an outlet for other colleagues to talk to me about their health issues, their challenges, their experiences as carers, their experiences, their worries with children with disability. So it has made me more confident as an ally as well. The authenticity of actually not being, society needs a better word than normal. I used to think I was normal. I still am normal. It's just I have to adjust to a very different version of normal.
I hear you, Andrew. In terms of just following that through, where do you hope, I suppose, your leadership style has changed or morphed as a consequence? And a supplementary to that, and how will that impact further the work of the network?
So, I would struggle to find my style as a leader. I'm hopefully none of the kind of comic tropes that exist around it, but I mentioned imposter syndrome in passing before. I've never had a job where I didn't feel like an imposter. And I think that's actually a fundamentally healthy sign to a limited degree, that there is an element where self-doubt that you're doing it wrong helps you be better at it. And I've seen great leaders, I've seen bad leaders. I like to borrow from the great and do the polar opposite of the poor sometimes. But anyway, sorry, bring it back to the question. I've learned in the last short period that I've spent my entire adult life slightly behind the start line in a race that everyone's running. And with diagnosis, which I'm fortunate enough to have had.
What do you mean by that?
So, life was very slightly harder for me for an extended period of time. Minor medical ailments became more material than they should. Suffering from unexplainable headaches, being tired when I shouldn't be, things like that. And the medical interventions I've had mean that that's not happening anymore. But the recognition that I have been living with a hidden disability for my adult life, that I wouldn't be able to say cured, but the impacts of which are significantly mitigated, has helped me understand a thing that I was always too bullish and confident to properly recognize before. Life is hard for absolutely everybody. It's harder to varying degrees for some people. And the answer to getting the most out of a team is to recognize both those truths and understand and be empathetic with the problems that people are suffering. None of them are the same. There's no magic. I mean, if I had the airport book of what the solution is to this problem, I would be coining it in sales. But the answer is to listen and understand and build a degree of trust with either people who report to you or people who you work with closely, so that they recognize that at their worst, you're going to have their back. And I think I might have been okay at that previously. I'm certainly far from perfect, and I'm still far from perfect, but it's helped me better have an eye for it and be significantly more patient when things go wrong, as they sort of do if you do what I do for a living.